the bottom line is we are the most taxed state. Yet, ironically, we rank 50th in equity. In the last 20 years, Chicago has seen the largest exodus of blacks of any city, including Detroit. Well over 250,000, overwhelmingly middle-income families with children.
Huh.
The adult population, the adult black population in Chicago over that period of time has declined 17%. The children, the population, the percentage of the drop in black children population, 47%. Why are they leaving? Crime, taxes, absence of quality schools, and people are not moving to Florida or Texas. Actually, the states that have been the recipients of the largest number of residents who have fled, there's Florida, Wisconsin, and Indiana. So they're just moving. Most of them are moving right across the border, and obviously Texas is a driving point. The problem with the schools is it's not only we're spending so much money, and let me point out that Illinois spends between 19% to 64% more per pupil than surrounding states. So we are spending more than our neighbors. It's not only that we're spending a lot of money, but at the same time, we're not allowing the schools to use that money in ways that can improve student achievement, because the collective bargaining contracts limit your ability to really restructure schools, to make changes in schools, to improve student achievement.
I guess I'm curious because for someone who is looking at this and envisioning, what could local school councils be doing? How would they choose to change? Like, if you could just wave a magic wand, how could things be different where you have more money flowing into the students? Like, what would that even look like? How would it take shape?
I'll tell you what we did in 1995, going back before you were born, by the way. And before your producer was born. And yes, I was bald then too. But anyway, the long story short, in 1995, the school system was on the verge of collapse. So the Republicans, led by Jim Edgar, gave the mayor control over the schools. They consolidated the revenues that went to the schools, and they removed obstacles to making changes in schools, basically telling the union, you can strike on financial issues, but you can't strike on issues involving education models, raising standards, and things like that. So what happened was we not only balanced the budget, but 6 years later, the school district had almost 40,000 more students. It had lost 115,000 students the previous 15 years. For a 7-year period, enrollment soared, and the schools were left with cash balances of almost $1 billion. Now, what do? We did some very simple things. The first thing we did was we gutted the central administration and central office. In other words, we really did school-based budgeting, where we built our budgets around the schools. The idea here was to maximize the amount of money flowing to the schools so that the schools would, the schools would be the primary recipient. So
books, library.
Exactly. And to give them discretion, not only on how to spend their overall budgets, but to give them complete discretion on their spending of Title I money, poverty money. And there were high schools that got well over $1 million in Title I money. So they were able to get that extra librarian or extra staff or extra counselor. The second thing we did was we really empowered and supported the councils. Now, I clashed with some of the councils because I was an accountability freak. You know what I mean? So if a council made a bad decision, I wouldn't hesitate. But I grew to appreciate this idea of local control. So you had elected local school councils and their principals had a lot of autonomy on how to spend that money most effectively. And then the third thing we did was to try to figure out a way to make the schools attractive by magnetizing schools. Not only did we open a number of new magnet high schools, they always say college prep. Well, all the high schools technically are supposed to be college prep. But the point is, we opened 6 or 7 versions of Whitney Young's. But we put magnet programs in neighborhood schools like International Baccalaureate programs, World Language Academy, programs. The whole idea was to put programs in neighborhood schools that made those schools attractive. So the bottom line is we gave people a reason. We gave people a reason to go to schools. We made those schools attractive. We gave those schools the autonomy to make changes at the local level. Right now, it's like the unions are there. They not only oppose charters, they oppose funding for private schools, they oppose alternative schools. They're even trying to undermine the magnet schools because the magnet schools are an embarrassment to them because the magnet schools outperform the neighborhood schools and they offer an embarrassing contrast. So they want to have these very rigid, union-dominated neighborhood schools with very limited autonomy and flexibility. But of course, those schools are struggling and many of them are failing.
Because you spent so much of your career in schools, it's natural for me to ask you a little bit about education. And you're talking about, so there's one thing that's happening in Illinois right now. Illinois just lowered our education standards. We said, what it takes to be proficient, we're going to decrease that. But you're almost saying from experience that if you raise standards, kids will raise to meet it?
Well, there is a systematic abandonment of standards. And we have to understand that this is happening nationally because it's almost as if the unions have given up on they have no answer to academic underperformance. So what they're doing is they're faulting the tests. They're trying to change the report card or get rid of the report card altogether. So you've seen it. You saw it at the state level. They're claiming that they're bringing their standards, their equivalency or proficiency standards in line with the national standards. Now, what you're doing is you're lowering standards. Don't try to pretend or rationalize what you're doing. You're lowering the standard for proficiency so you can show that more students are meeting proficiency. And I think Illinois policy, again, pointed out that on the NAEP exam, the test scores are abysmal, and they've been abysmal. And the public schools have not returned to their pre-COVID NAEP scores, where the Catholic schools and the private schools are thriving, many of the charter schools, in states that did not restrict them and force them to stay closed like they did in Chicago for 78 consecutive weeks during COVID. Those schools are thriving again. But the Chicago public schools, the anti-social promotion, they have stopped holding schools accountable or teachers accountable in their evaluations for non-student performance. Those aren't factors that are really being considered to any degree. And they've even stopped, per board policy, the ranking of schools academically. So you're not going to be able to tell how your school is performing unless you hunt down and go on the state website to try to get the state test scores. You're not going to be able to see how the schools are performing vis-a-vis other schools because the mayor-controlled school board, in its wisdom, decided that we're not going to rank the schools by academic performance. Stacey Davis Gates has gone as far as to claim that testing is like the creation of white supremacists to basically punish black students or to hold black students down. I think what she said is actually harsher than what I articulated. I think I kind of did the soft ones on that. But the bottom line is they're basically blaming testing and accountability on race. They call people who support school choice Southern segregationists. So they're just throwing out those words and those claims willy-nilly. But their goal has been their programs are failing, so they want to erase any evidence of that failure.